Why? Wait, what do you, okay, you don't like Comic Sans and you don't like Papyrus? Are you just a strict Times New Roman?
No, absolutely not. But Comic Sans is truly the worst font to ever exist.
I personally take offense.
I literally thought you put this document in Comic Sans to like get at me. Yes. Like,
welcome to our welcoming show. Here's your least favorite.
I make it so well known that I hate Comic Sans.
I didn't know this.
It belongs nowhere outside of a 4th grade book report.
I'm now scrolling through. Did you know there's a font called Covered by Your Grace?
There are some weird ones.
Not real.
There are some weird ones. My favorite weird title is Just Me Again down here. That's literally a font.
That's a font?
No!
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Anytime I'm sad, I'm just going to look through fonts now. These are weird.
Oh my God. I feel like my opinion of you has changed by your usage of this font. I'm not even kidding.
And with that, welcome to Point of View. Sometimes the perfect cold open really just writes itself
in Comic Sans.
In Comic Sans. I love that. Oh, Dan's gonna love that. Nick, do you remember how to do this?
Oh, I remember how to do this.
How are you? I feel like it's been so long since we've done this, even though we've hung out in the interim. And it's really only been a few weeks.
In the interim. It has only been a few weeks. Nice microphone.
Thanks. New one. Do I sound different?
No. Kidding, you do. Right. You sound great. Better than you ever have.
Fantastic. How are you? Are you a dead man walking? I asked you this earlier when we talked. I feel like I'm a little tired.
I'm a little tired. I feel like the weekend we just had, because we'll do an episode about this, but we just played the game Big Brother. So if you know, well, I didn't, I hosted it, but if you know the game on TV on CBS, we played that over a weekend. We had 2 houses. We had the keys, we had the veto ceremony, the veto medallion. We had everything. And I was driving people back and forth to the different houses, like the evicted people to the jury house. So it feels unreal.
Well, you did a fantastic job. I just have to say, I mean, we will talk about this, but on a future episode, I think we might even do like a Bravo Andy Cohen style reunion maybe episode. But I think, can you channel your inner Andy Cohen?
No, I channeled my inner Julie all weekend.
You did channel your inner Julie Chen.
Chen. And now here I am, exhausted, with nothing on my mind but Little Debbie and her mom, full-size Deborah.
What?
It's one of my favorite memes right
now.
Have you ever seen it? I think you've Cards Against Humanity card.
Yeah. Yes. And wait, wasn't another Cards Against Humanity card an inspiration for one of the competitions for this weekend?
Yes, it was. Finding Nemo, then pan frying him.
Yes, and the competition. You froze little fish figurines and you had to get the fish out of the ice, right?
Yes, and then put it in the little mini pan.
I'm not going to tell you how bad I did, but I didn't do well.
He didn't do bad either.
Well,
he didn't do poorly. We'll leave it at that. We'll talk about that on the
We'll talk about that in another episode. But I'm good. Also, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I made our guest laugh already, which is just, this episode's been a success.
I'm super excited for our guest. We'll get there in a moment. You asked me how I was.
I did do that.
I think I said I was good. before we started recording, we all know that was a lie. I've had a day. I don't know. It's like, I think it's because I didn't get a lot of sleep this weekend with the game, and although I should have, but I didn't, and I don't know. I had the Monday blues, but I'm doing fine. I'm doing better. I'm doing better. It's as the hours have gone by, it's gotten better. You know, it's been one of those things. I've been looking forward to this episode and recording all day. So this is I can confidently say is going to be and is already the highlight of my day. So I'm glad you're a part of it. I'm glad our guest is a part of it. You know, this guest has jokingly asked to be on the podcast, and then when we finally invited her, she was like, I don't know what we're going to talk about. But it's been a long time coming. We're super excited to have her on. Let me introduce her. So our guest today is a New Jersey native, is a fellow Loyola Greyhound who worked as a social justice intern in Loyola's campus ministry office, not at the same time as us, but part of that legacy of campus ministry interns. After graduating with a Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology and Gender Studies in 2014, she served as a year-long volunteer with Rostro de Cristo in Duran, Ecuador, which I definitely butchered the pronunciation of that city. I'm so sorry. Where she was volunteered at a care facility for people with Hansen's disease, or formerly known as leprosy, as well as at an after-school program for neighborhood youth. After being a year-long volunteer in Ecuador, she went on to pursue her Master's of Arts in Social Justice at Loyola University in Chicago, and she currently works as the Assistant Director for Social Justice in Loyola University Maryland's Office of Campus Ministry, which you and I, that's where we met her. She is a relatively new member of the Marvel Cinematic Universe fandom, as well as the Star Wars fandom, and I always appreciate her in real-time reactions to watching those movies on her social media pages. She is a good friend. I think I can speak for both of us in saying that, a good friend of ours and of this show. Without further ado, please welcome Emily Kane.
Hi.
Welcome.
Yay, this is so exciting.
Hi, how are you?
I just sit and listen to that whole introduction of myself.
It's kind of fun, right? How often do you get to
Not often.
listen to your resume be read to you?
No, not often. I'm not sure that I would put myself in the Star Wars fandom.
Okay.
But I have now seen them.
You've now seen them. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair.
That's going to be a hot take, but it's fine.
We love those.
It's all right.
We love those on this show.
I'll tell George.
Probably.
Lucas, that is.
Oh.
I was going to say, what does that have to do with anything? Probably not the first hot take of this episode, you know?
No.
But
No.
you so wait, talk a little bit about that. Like, did you get Disney Plus and you just decided, or did the pandemic hit, or how did you get into these Marvel movies all of a sudden?
So it actually started with Game of Thrones.
Oh,
So
okay.
I was in my last semester of grad school writing my thesis, and I decided what better time to start watching the entire series of Game of Thrones than that semester. So I started watching and I was documenting it because like everybody had already seen Game of Thrones, and for me it was all new. So I started posting it on my stories, and then my friend from Loyola actually came up with a hashtag Kane of Thrones. And from then it just took off. And so I watched the entire series in time to watch the series finale with the public
When it was released, yeah.
when it was released. And I don't know, then it just kind of like snowballed to Star Wars because I had never seen a Star Wars movie. And then Marvel was a natural third option after that. So I've just been like documenting it. And it started before the pandemic, but then like once the pandemic hit, I was like, well, this is
You had all the time
all
in the
I'm
world.
doing.
You know? Yeah.
Yep. So they're all saved on my Instagram stories. So
In the archive. Wait,
In
like
the
on your
yeah, like you can look at them anytime.
I can look at them? Oh, well, I know what I'm doing when we're done with this episode.
That was basically my entire pandemic. It was just like
fantastic.
drinking red wine and like watching movies and posting on Instagram about it.
It's so wonderful though, because as someone who has kind of like followed along with at least Marvel, Star Wars, I'm more of a casual fan, I would say. It's funny, like when you were watching the Infinity Saga, just knowing what was coming, I was like, ooh, like I can't wait to see how she reacts to this.
Yeah, I had some major spoilers, like just by existing in the world and on social media. But like I was watching the first Star Wars movie and my dad walked in while I was watching it and goes, "Oh, isn't this the one where Darth Vader cuts his hand off?" And I was like,
spoiler alert.
I don't know.
Who hasn't
like
seen that movie yet. Yeah.
I was like, I'm not sure. I guess it is. Like, so there are just some things you can't avoid, but some things I was very surprised by. I mean, Marvel holds up. That is a great like franchise.
It's a commitment.
Series. Yeah, it is.
Because it's a lot of movies now. Like a lot. Have you been keeping up with them as they've been coming out now?
No. I think I stopped at I haven't seen Black Widow. Or is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you seen Shang-Chi?
No.
No. Okay. So you haven't
Justin
seen
loves that movie.
I love Shang-Chi.
Do you really?
I think
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's the first not like you and Comic Sans.
I interpret everything as sarcasm.
I love
you do.
I love Shang-Chi. It was the first Asian American or Asian superhero, not just he's actually Asian Canadian. But Asian superhero in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So that. I wanted to get little like I'm about to hold up one of those Funko Pops. Like you know these little things with the blur is not working. But you never see these things?
Yeah.
These things? I want one of those for Shang-Chi, but I haven't gotten one.
Not yet.
No.
Dare to dream.
It's on the wish list. Maybe for Christmas.
I did start the first ever Marvel movie I saw was Black Panther. And so it was actually the day that Chadwick Boseman died. And that night, my roommate and I were like, we should watch it. And so I am hyped for Wakanda Forever, but I've not seen it yet.
Yes. I am very excited for that movie as well. I am very curious about how they handled his passing. Because obviously that was like, they probably had a script written and then Chadwick Boseman passed away and they had to figure out a way. They weren't just going to recast, you had to handle that in a way that was respectful and, everything that comes with that. So I'm very curious to see what it's about because I don't know.
Do you think that he let them know beforehand? Like, I know he didn't tell, like, the public, but do you think he, like, gave them, like, this
Maybe.
is not, like, this is gonna sound very casual, but, like, gave them notice, I guess, or, like, a heads up that, like, he wasn't doing well?
I think he knew when he was filming Black Panther, right?
Yes.
So I imagine at some point he must have been like, hey, by the way.
Right.
I'm sure like certain members of the cast and crew that he was close with, he let them know. But I don't know if he was
still
like,
so sad.
Hey, Marvel execs.
So sad.
It's so sad. But also a lot of respect to him for keeping it so private when he like lived such a life in the spotlight. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah. I need to go see it.
Yes, me too. Anyway, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We're so happy to have you. I think this is going to be a fun episode. I have a feeling it's going to be a long episode. So just listeners, I mean, we've been away for a bit. So I think this will be hopefully give you your dose of dew.
It's so bad.
We ask our guests the same question. Would you like to do the honors?
No. I'm kidding, of course. If you were a fruit, what fruit would you be? And by chance, why?
So Luckily, I had a lot of time to think about this question.
I'm so excited for this.
And
It's been-
Justin has been waiting for months for an answer to this question.
Did you remember your answer?
I think so. I remembered about like an hour ago that I did not cross-reference with Lupe. But I think I remember.
Okay.
So I would be a passion fruit, and
Ooh.
I'm not sure how familiar you are with passion fruits. But like just on their own, they're like really, really, really tart. Like you can't eat a regular passion fruit. It's just like too much. But once you like add it to things, or you like add lots of like sugar, or you put it in something, it's like delicious. One of the best fruits. So I think for me, sometimes I can be a little rough around the edges. And I feel like you guys met me through work. So like my job is literally to like care for people. So I like am not in that setting, but I can like be sarcastic. It can be a little like a biting wit, you know? So I think I'm a little rough around the edges. But when you get to know me and you know like who I am and my potential, then I can really like blossom into this like great, wonderful thing. Was that worth it?
I love that.
Was
Is
that
worth
worth
it? Yes.
the wait?
That was fantastic. Yes.
That was a terrible explanation. But I do
No.
love a passion fruit.
I've said this before in the show, and Nick, I feel like you can agree with me, but I feel like so many guests come on and feel like they need to have this giant philosophical answer to it, and some people are like, I don't know, I think I'm this because I like that fruit, and that's just as easy of an like a great of an answer too. Like I just the interpretation of how people answer this question is why I really really like it, and I think that was a great answer.
Thank you. I'm living proof that if you complain long enough and loudly enough about not being invited on a podcast, you can get on a podcast and share what fruit you are.
What fruit you are.
There is hope. See what I did there? Also, to all future like answer givers, I guess, guests, if you will, to this question.
Yes, you're just answer givers on this show.
It's fine. Like, it's not a big deal. No one is gonna have a better answer than me, and that's okay. Like, I just
You took 3 tries though. You have to like.
What was the result? What fruit are you?
I'm a cherry. Let's
It's
talk
a
about
wonderful
hope.
answer. It's a
Let's talk
wonderful
about
answer.
Life is a journey. It's an evolution of fruit.
Yes. And that's okay. So that's a great segue into what I wanted to ask you next. So you've given me so much advice just in general. I don't know if you know this, like you say your baseline is sarcastic, but you've actually given me lots of like really great things. To like specifically, one of the like best pieces of advice you've given me recently was I was struggling, maybe it was this spring, of just trying to figure out what my next step in life was going to be. And I find that a lot of members of our audience tend to be, around college age, maybe just out of college, maybe just before college, maybe grad school, that type of time. And I definitely am not alone in trying to figure out what comes next after college, right? Because whether you go to college or not, at least through high school, and if you go to college, all the way through college, your life is scripted. It's a recipe. You're going, dot, 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 dot. And then when you graduate college, you get to do whatever you want to do, which is a great liberating thing, but it can also be a really stress-inducing thing.
Terrifying.
For someone who, wants a plan, is used to a plan. It's awful. So I wanted to just kind of ask you. Well, actually, I should probably share the advice you gave me, which was instead of. Yeah, she gave me advice. It was great.
Big
not going to
reveal.
share it. I'm not going to share.
She said, "Justin, nothing matters anymore."
Sometimes that's the advice I give.
The piece of advice you gave me was when there's a lot of pressure to look to next stage, what comes like way out, just figure out what the next right step is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what I needed. Is I was trying to figure out like what job I was going to do, what if I was going to do grad school, what path, if it was a doctorate, PhD, PsyD, master's, what. and I was super overwhelmed because I'm like, okay, should probably start on a path that's like, okay, this is the career path that I'm taking. But really, the advice you gave me was just simplify it. What is the next right step for you right now? And that honestly is what helped me with, okay, I'm going to apply for the job that I currently have now. And I'm now, okay, next right step. Now I'm going to apply to PsyD programs. And we were just talking about how that's super stressful for me right now, but it has helped me simplify things and not put the pressure that I often do, and I'm sure many people do, of like, okay, this decision that I make in this moment is going to have ripple effects for years to come, so it needs to be the right decision, because that's just awful. So so that was a piece of advice that you gave me that's really helpful. And so I want to ask you, one, is there a piece of advice that you have been given that has been helpful to kind of set you on your own trajectory? And the second part of that is, what are kind of some of those big moments in your life that you can think of that have kind of led you to where you are? I think it would be helpful for our audience who are, like I said, are in those formative years of near college, around college, college adjacent times of their lives. It could be helpful to not just hear from Nick and I, but from you as well.
Got it. And I thought we were going to open with the hard questions.
Yeah.
Best advice of your life. Go.
I didn't even give you this one. This is one.
Yeah, I was going to say, this wasn't on the prompt.
Off script. What?
No, I think for me, hearing that myself, of finding the next right thing, was really transformative for me. So like, I can't take full credit. There's like a full podcast called The Next Right Thing. Like, it's not like me. And of course now I don't know what the woman's name is.
Coming on our show, having the audacity to plug another podcast. I'm kidding.
Mostly for my plagiarized advice. But I think what was really helpful for me in college was so I came from, I guess, like a first gen family, which I didn't fully identify until later. I had some external folks in my family who had gone to college, but neither of my parents had graduated from college. And so there was a big push, right, of like, you have to go, you have to do these things, you have to get a return on our investment, right? That was the big phrase, return on investment. So when I was graduating, I was like really stressed and trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I was trying to convince myself to go to grad school. I was like, that's the only way that I can achieve what I'm meant to do, which I didn't even know what that was. And so I had to take the GRE, and I kept putting it off, and I kept putting it off, and I kept putting it off. And every week,
awful test.
I
hate that.
Which that's a whole nother issue. But I would come in to my supervisor, Pat Range. I'd come into his office in campus ministry, and he's like, "Did you schedule your test yet?" And I was like, "No." And one day he just looked at me and he was like, "Do you want to take the test? Like, do you want to go to grad school?" And I was like, "No, I don't." And like, somebody just granting me the freedom to say like, "No, I don't." And asking me even like what I want rather than what I think I'm supposed to do was so liberating. And like, that's not to say like, oh, then you make that decision and it's easy from there on out. That's just step one, right? Is making the decision. But somebody allowing me the space to think about an alternative was really, really helpful. And then I could start envisioning, what would my life look like if I got to choose what came next? And that's where I started exploring like years of service, right? And that's what I was figuring out. Okay, maybe I want to do a volunteer year. So like, what would that look like? But that's really how I lived 5 full years after I graduated college. I was changing locations, cities, jobs school every year, up until I came to this job now. So it's not to say that it's like not terrifying, because it totally is, but being able to trust, like, if I can get a sense of what feels right for this next step, I don't have to know where I'm going to be in 15 years. Like, God, that's so much pressure, So it's like, I just have to figure out where next, because like you said, it was like everything was prescribed up until you graduate college, and then it's like, well, here you go. The world's your oyster, for better or worse, right? Like, but I think my decision to do a year of service was super transformative. Going to a new country, not being able to speak the language very well. I was thrown into a completely new environment. I lived in a community that was really not formally recognized by the government. It kind of popped up informally as people moved in from the countryside to work in Guayaquil, in the big, like, economic capital of Ecuador. And living with people who are experiencing poverty, material poverty, right? Like, day in and day out in that setting. I mean, there's no way that doesn't transform your life.
Yeah.
I came back from that year just being like in awe of the people that I lived in community with, and coming back looking at this world, right, and being like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And there's just like the Jesuit Volunteer Corps has this phrase that they've coined, but I think everyone who does the year of service kind of experiences it. It's like ruined for life. Right? Like, once you experience that, you once you open your eyes to how the majority of the world lives, it's impossible to unsee that.
Yeah.
So that's like a major turning point for me, and like my interest in immigration, which is like what I focused on in graduate school, and my desire to find a career path that was meaningful to me, without a doubt, the most transformative experience of my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if we've talked about it on the show, Nick, but I think you and I have had conversations, and same with you, Emily, about the difference between mission trips, immersion trips, and years of service. And, the phrase that comes to mind sometimes is just like that savior complex, right? Sometimes if you go and do a mission trip and you go into a community that, as you mentioned, is materially poor, and you go in and you might build a house, and then it's like, okay, great, and then you leave, versus like really experiencing and getting to know the people and building relationships and understanding how people live. And I'm sure, I mean, I mentioned that the two types of service that you did there were working in a community that cares for people with Hansen's disease or leprosy, and then working, was it an after school program with youth?
Yeah.
And so those are very different experiences. I don't know if those were like, that was day and then night, or if it was like on certain days you did the Hansen's disease unit, and then other days you did the after school program. But I'm sure just even moving to a new country that doesn't speak the language that you speak, that's immersion in and of itself. And someone who's not good at change in what you're used to in and of itself. But then the different types of service too that you did, I'm sure was, I don't know, jarring is the right word, but just maybe something you're not used to.
Yeah, I remember getting to Ecuador and our first full day walking out into the neighborhood, and I felt like I was on the moon. I was like, I don't recognize this. Like, this is so out of my realm of experience, right? Yeah, it was, I mean, jarring, and I think like jarring in the best way. And I went in there, I was like, I do not like children. I don't like kids. I don't want to really work with kids. The community that I was in, like, most of the volunteers worked with kids, and I was like, not my thing. So I was at the after school program 5 days a week, And then in the morning, I would go to Damien House. That was the name of the hospital. And I'd be there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday mornings. So I'd hang out with 89-year-old men playing dominoes. And then the afternoon, I would go and play, like, teach the 5, 6, and 7-year-olds, like, their colors. And so it was, like, just these wild extremes. And there was so much going on, and it was so chaotic and so beautiful. And I think what really was so special about my volunteer program, Rosa de Cristo, is that it was focused on relationships, not acts of service. And their sort of tagline was like being with, not doing for, right? So having to accept the humility that we don't have answers, we don't have solutions, I don't have any special skills, right? But I'm going to be there with people, walk with people, learn from people. And so that really, I think, was what made it unique and informed my understanding of social justice work forever. Because before then, I talk about this all the time. In college, I was insufferable. I thought I knew everything. I literally thought I knew everything. My volunteer year taught me, like, I really don't know anything. And the only thing I do know is, like, how to build relationships with other people. But yeah, that shaped everything from there on out. I think I would have a totally different understanding of social justice work without that experience.
You talk about social justice. Can you explain in your own words what it is? Because we hear that word, we hear that term a lot. And I guess why it's important to be in that field.
Yeah, so this is like a hard question. It feels like it should be like a softball question that I'm like, totally, I have like my clear-cut answer, but I think it changes all the time.
You're a master in it. You know? Yeah.
It's so horrific. Yeah. I mean, I'm just like, I guess. Yeah. But for me, like, I see social justice as the circumstance in which we are living in right relationship with others and with a higher power, right? God, whatever you want to call that. And that right relationship is a very, like, that's a very Catholic phrasing, but it's one that really resonates with me because in order for me to be in right relationship with others, I can't be benefiting from a system that oppresses others, right? I can't be utilizing like 700 times the energy consumption, right? That like, so that other people around the other side of the world like have to suffer from the effects of that. Like that does not equal right relationship. So it's a little amorphous and it's not my best answer. My grad school professors might not be thrilled with me, but like that fundamentally is what it comes down to for me. Am I in right relationship with others? Am I in right relationship with God or this higher being, right? And then everything else stems from that. And it's also interesting, like, being in this field, right? Like, it feels like it isn't really even a field. Like, I was applying to my job. I say this all the time. And I had just graduated with a master's in social justice. I was applying to be assistant director for social justice. I was like, if I don't get this job, I'm never going to get any job because this is like the most qualified I'll ever be to do anything. Like, so, but it's really, I think so many people do this work without this title, right? The vast majority of people do this work without it being explicitly labeled as social justice. And someone told me once, it's like a kind of a very Jesuit perspective, that whatever you're doing, you know, you have like liberation theologians. It's like liberation theology is a discipline of theology. So you have these people who are liberation theologians. They were like, whatever you do, be a liberation blank. Like anything that you're doing, you need to be working for a more just and equitable world through that position, right? Through that career, because we all have different gifts and talents. I think when it comes down to it, my job is more about talking to people and connecting with people than it is about my expertise in social justice, because it doesn't exist. Like, I've like learned stuff and studied stuff, but more than anything, my gift is, I think, connecting with people. And so, but anybody can do that, and everybody can approach their work through the lens of justice. But it takes some reworking of our frameworks and narratives and understanding.
Yeah.
I really liked what you said. I liked your definition, because when I was thinking about it, I was thinking like doing right by other people, or just like promoting the best for everyone. But I liked how you said it was a very Catholic definition, but like the width that you put in there, like WITH, kind of takes you out of it, as in like, oh, I'm doing this for people. It kind of takes that savior complex out of it a little bit. Not that it's like fully there when you're saying, oh, I'm doing good for people. Like that's not, I think that in and of itself is just like a good thing.
And like the right relationship piece too, I like as well, because relationships are two-way streets.
Right.
So it's not just one person acting to cause change, to do help. It's right relationship. I think of reaching a hand out and someone reaching a hand back.
That's what I mean by the width. Right relationship. It's very challenging though. That definition itself is very challenging, because you explained what you meant by in right relationship with, and it's like not benefiting from systems that are oppressing other people, and yet here we are, and by definition of just existing where we do, and having like the technology that we're using to and I don't mean to be like a downer, but like we do benefit from those systems. So it's like, are we ever really, is it a goal, or is it a way of life?
Yeah.
Or is it both? Because it's not a destination.
Yeah.
But that ties into hope, I think.
Yes.
So
I think often about MLK's quote, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And I feel like I spent so much time being like, does it though? Like, does it? Because it feels like it doesn't. And then I heard, and I can't remember who said this, but it was an activist who said, like, yeah, it bends towards justice because people are bending it, right? People are bending that arc. You have to put in effort and energy and work to bend that arc. We can't just hope that, oh, one day it'll resolve itself. Once the population of the US is more diverse than it's ever been, it'll just fix itself. It's like, no, these systems will self-perpetuate until we have to bend the arc. And that, I think, really like transformed it for me. And it ties in very much to what you're saying about hope, because it's easy to just fall into like, well, everything is like messed up and it's never gonna get any better. I have to pull myself out of that all the time. This is why, like, I told Mairead, who's both of you know.
Yeah, been on the show too.
Yeah.
I've heard of her.
I told her today that she's like, oh my gosh, what are you talking about in the podcast? And I was like, hope. And she started laughing. And I was like, I mean, fair. Like, because I don't do well with hope, which is exactly why I said, like, I think this is what I want to talk to y'all about, because it's freaking hard. It is hard. And that's speaking as like a white woman who's had it relatively easy, right? Like, it is hard to remain hopeful, or to even engage in hope, even like much less remain hopeful. So yeah, I think those things are absolutely connected. Totally.
Before we do a deep dive into hope, because I do want to do that, and being the optimist on the show, I think really
you're outnumbered.
I'm
Nick, I don't want to speak for you, but
let us just enter a place that is, void of all hope, which is the world of politics. Recently, and I think this ties into it. This isn't me just being like, let me just suck the air out of the room. Although I do that too.
You're only the optimist by default.
By default.
Okay.
It depends. If I'm at my family dinner table, I'm not the optimist. But it's everything it's contextual. Everything's contextual.
Mm-hmm.
We needed an optimist, so we were like, all right, we'll give it to Justin.
The point of do should be positive, right? We're talking about social justice. We're talking about hope, and we recently, as we're all in the United States. Some of our audience is not in the United States, but the United States just had a midterm election, and by some definition, we're still having a midterm election.
We're still there.
States are still counting. But I wanted to bring up the midterms a little bit because I feel like not a lot, but a good piece of social justice work, when I think about social justice work, is advocacy work. And when I think of advocacy work, I think of policy, public policy, politics, everything's tied in. It's not everything, but it's important. So I wanted to bring up, maybe if you could talk a little bit about how advocacy ties into social justice for you.
So initially, when we were trying to find dates to record, I was like, I'm not doing this until the midterms are over. Because my perspective on hope is going to drastically change depending on the outcome of the midterms. And I think like what we saw in the midterms in many ways was an expression of hope through advocacy work. Because I was listening to a lot of, I don't want to plug another
You're allowed. I was just joking.
Plug another podcast. I listen to Pod Save America, which is former Obama White House employees, staffers, who they just talk about politics now. And they were saying, so many things have happened to make us feel like hopeless in politics. Like, oh my God, exactly like where hope goes to die, like suck the air out of the room. Like, that's politics. And in a lot of ways, what we saw happen on Tuesday and in the following days were people saying no to really extreme candidates, right? To people that were kind of running on a hopeless message. And it's not often that I think we get to see kind of concrete results of like, do people even care about this? Is anybody paying attention? And like the answer on Tuesday was yes, which like does not always happen, right? Like as we've seen.
That's powerful.
It's just like
that is very powerful.
We don't always get to see that. And I think that's, I was reflecting on this in this context, and that's what made Obama's campaign in 2008 and 2012, right? It was like he connected so many different people because he ran on a message of hope. Yes, we can, right? That's what, I don't even know if y'all remember that. You're like,
yes. Yeah.
How old are you?
I was in 5th grade. I was in 5th grade, but I remember it.
I was 16 and pissed off that I couldn't vote.
Yeah.
Not but John McCain winning in my elementary school.
Same, I think.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's like what drew people in, and he brought people together like we had not seen in decades. And that's why campaigns like Trump's, like while it had some mild success in the beginning, can't survive, right? Because they run on a message of fear and hopelessness and despair. And like when you can bring people together under a semblance of a vision for the future, that's what brings people out, right, to vote. So it's very much about politics and less about like direct advocacy, but I think those things are all connected. Like people feel hopeless and won't go out to vote, won't call their senator, representative, won't send the email, won't pay attention to the news because it feels so depleting. And I totally get that. For me, as someone who's got big time control issues, this is the only way I feel like I can like control my rage, is like calling the attorney general's office and being like, you can't put this person to death, right? Like calling my senator and being like, thank you for voting the right way. Like, I really appreciate this. Like,
you found a very productive way to channel.
I was going to say.
Only partially. I still have a lot of rage.
Do you have rage? Call your senator.
Yes. But like, genuinely, like, that is a way to combat my hopelessness. And like, does it feel like screaming into the void to leave a message on the White House voicemail box? Like, a little bit. But like, we have to be able to engage. And that requires a degree of hope. Yeah. It's not easy.
No, yeah. No. And I mean, to put two concrete things that were on the ballot were women's reproductive rights and abortion were one thing that was on the ballot. And a lot of people were saying, there were a lot of election deniers, 2020 election deniers, and people were saying, you know, that democracy is on the ballot as well. And I think those two things, among others, and please, if I'm missing something, because I've had a long day and maybe my brain's not working, but like if I'm missing something, though, I feel like those two issues brought people out to vote this cycle. I mean, it's a midterm. So you would expect that, you know, the Democrats have the House and the Senate and the White House. So you would expect historically that there would be the Republicans would gain some ground and get some seats. And they did, but it wasn't as big of a wave as vibes were telling. Polls were surprisingly accurate this cycle. I'm someone who follows the numbers with 538 when it comes to these type of things. And, but it was a historical midterm, and we're still getting answers, but in numbers, and there's going to be a lot of analysis about what brought people to the polls, who were the people that came to the polls. And there was a lot of this was interesting to me. There were in many states a lot of split ticket votes.
Yeah.
There would be, you might vote red for governor, but then blue for senator, or vice versa, and on the issues, it was all over the place. Like there were on a lot of ballot measures across the country. There were like 51% to 49%. Just I think democracy came out on election day on November 8th because it was fascinating to me how there weren't really landslides, but there were people spoke with their vote. It gave me hope, even though I started this segment with "Let's enter a place to all devoid of hope," because I feel like it was democracy at work, and it was very, very amazing to see.
I think when it comes down to it, like as negative or as like pessimistic as we can be as a society, I don't think people want to be made to feel like there is no future, right? Or like they don't want, I don't think they want these negative messages that a lot of these campaigns were running on. Like it doesn't sell because people want to feel like at our core as human beings, we want to feel like the future can be brighter, right? And I will always say this, that the Republicans, the GOP can out-organize Democrats in every way pretty much, but being able to operate under a banner of here's what we have hope for in our future brings coalitions together. Like I think that's just, and that is what we saw. And thank God, because Jesus, I took off on Thursday because I was like, I'm not coming in. I was not ready.
I stayed up till 2:30 on Tuesday. I think I told both of you this, and I did this in 2022. I mean, it was a presidential election, and people are more excited about those than they are about midterms. And Dan, hi Dan, stayed up with me in 2020 and like till 3 a.m. we were waiting for things to come in. I don't know why I did this for the midterms. I think it's just, I don't know. I'm just so fascinated by the democratic process, but I don't know. It was interesting to me, and not even just the big races, not even just, you know, the toss up Senate races, toss up House races, but ballot measures too. I think they had a big night, like marijuana, you know, was legalized in five states, I think, on election day, when a woman's right to an abortion was on the ballot. Women's reproductive rights were upheld in every state that it was on the ballot. Like those things too, not just the candidates, but the actual measures I found were fascinating to see.
Right when we're on the brink of like, I swear to God, if this doesn't go the right way, it's gonna be like we were teetering on the edge there, and like I have a renewed sense of hope that like seeing what happened on Tuesday. But that's why I was like, I'm just unwilling to discuss before these results come out because I'm too stressed.
I have a thought about, I mean, Justin, you just mentioned how the ballots were not one color this time around.
A lot of purple.
And this might be a pessimist, right? And this might be a pessimistic thought, but it's just something I've been thinking about, or have thought about in the past. My observation was that this was the first time that many people who have experienced a lot of privilege, just I'm speaking individuals, not like, I don't want to generalize, saw themselves on the ballot a little bit. And I feel like it was interesting. I don't want to generalize again and be like, oh, red versus, like, red votes this way or blue votes this way, but do you know what I'm saying, though? Like, there were a lot of, I know people in my own life who voted a different way than they normally do because, and they didn't say it explicitly, but this was the first time they felt like, oh, this is enraging. This is not okay. That's what the message I'm trying to get. So I hope that moving forward.
Do you mean like an issue, or like an issue someone was running on, or an issue?
Oh, I'm speaking about
like affected.
I'm speaking about abortion rights. I didn't. I don't know if in reproductive health care. Okay. A lot of people who, and again, that even saying a lot of people is a generalization, right, but people who have not been as passionate about social justice issues were suddenly angry, and rightfully so. But I hope that in future elections, those same people will continue to show up for other causes as well, because that one was extremely important.
My sweatshirt, can we reference my sweatshirt?
Yeah.
Let women run shit. Including the music industry. Including the music industry, I have to say. But that's neither here nor there. I have to say, I just hope that we continue to show up for causes that don't affect us as well. And they do all affect us in some way. It's all interconnected, but of course people are going to be more affected and more harmed by certain laws than others. Like, I can't have children. Like, I can't produce a child, or I can't give birth to a child. So obviously, I'm not the person that anti-abortion laws are discriminating against. But
and I think that like gets at kind of the core of our question of like, who are we voting for? Like, not candidates, but I mean, like, are we voting out of like for our own self-interest, or are we voting in the interests of the most vulnerable people in our society? And I think a lot of people have waited until the 11th hour when democracy is teetering on the brink to feel affected by like the Dobbs decision, right? The Supreme Court decision. Like, and it's hard because I don't want to be like too little too late, because it's not, because that made a huge difference in the midterms, but like if we were voting with the most vulnerable people in our mind, those votes could have changed a lot earlier, right? And like, we've been through a lot. Like, just being at the teach-in, we were going to the Capitol.
Ignatian Family Teach-in for Justice.
Oh, sorry, yeah. We were walking up like to the Capitol, and I was having like January 6th flashbacks. Not that I was there, but like watching it on TV. And I was like,
Right.
oh, right, there was
Right.
a violent coup attempt since the last time I was here.
It's an insurrection. It's an insurrection.
Yeah, like we've had, that was the big thing about George Floyd's murder, right? Was that like it hit a limit for people. But even then, some people did not hit that limit. Like, how much suffering are we willing to put others through until it hits home for us? And again, like, I am glad that people have changed their minds and came out for that. But we could have used it a lot sooner. And like you said, we have to continue to show up for not just our own interests, but for kind of the common good is an overused phrase, but kind of,
I'm gonna say it reminds me of the poem First They Came, which campus ministry
Right.
did use. I think it was before you worked there as a professional staff, but we used that on the the green board that needs to be thrown out so badly.
Yeah.
The wooden thing. Yes, that.
Uh-huh.
And I really like that poem, but it's by Martin Niemöller. I don't know how to say his last name. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not good with accents over letters.
We'll include it in the show notes.
Sounds great.
Include it in the show notes.
I thought you just said the show nouns. I was like, wow, I love that.
The show nouns.
The show
I
nouns.
love that.
So, another controversial topic in society, religion.
Religion and politics.
Brum,
This is why you brought me here.
Exactly. Hey, Thanksgiving's coming up this week, so it's.
I'm like, it is not family holiday until my grandmother calls me a communist, So it just
I'm
happens.
dead.
It always
I'm
happens,
dead.
so it's fine.
I want to bring in another topic, controversial topic, because religion and politics. I guess that's what we're doing on this episode with you, Emily. Thanksgiving's coming up. It's a wonderful time to do that. But the three of us did meet in an office of campus ministry at a Jesuit Catholic university. I think that's important to bring up, and religion has played a role in different role, but has played some sort of role in the three of our lives. And the reason I bring it up is because in what we were just talking about, there's a dichotomy between the religious. I find
Woof.
where there's some people with certain religious beliefs that lean towards one way of the political spectrum, and again, this is overgeneralizing. And then there's another section of the religious that lean toward the other way of the spectrum, and that's fascinating to me in the world of politics. But then also, and Emily, you brought this up when we were planning for this episode, you mentioned that some of the most long-standing social justice movements that still have traction and are still kind of advocating for different things have come out of churches and been founded in churches. So I don't know if I necessarily have a question with what this kind of section of the episode, but I did want to bring the conversation towards it because it's religion is fascinating to me, and its role in all of these things that we've been talking about.
It's messy. It's super, super messy. Yeah, I think this is something that I've reflected on a ton as my personal relationship with religion, organized religion, has shifted. I have gotten so frustrated and jaded and like pessimistic about like so much of organized religion because of what we see and like these just like really well organized strategic moves to weaponize religion. And then at the same time, you have the Poor People's Campaign, right? Which started with Martin Luther King Jr. Like, you have these super long standing movements that have their base in a community of faith. And I'm like, how do these things exist at the same time? How do I reconcile my desire to work for justice when I'm struggling with my faith? But there's something so powerful by recognizing that, like, the reason that I think the reason why these movements that are in faith communities are so long standing is because you have something to look to. You have values that connect to you. You have a sense of something greater that gives you this like life sustaining hope. I've never said that word so many times in a conversation, but like this is something I told you before, was like, it is so easy to just get burned out, right? I always tell people, you flame out like a dying star, because it's just so big and so emotional and so difficult to like look at the world, that if you don't have something, a greater vision to look towards, it's easy to just like flame out. And I think that's why they have such like power in being able to work for justice. But it is like totally, it's a confusing place to be. It's a confusing dichotomy.
Yeah. I think you've helped me a lot with that through college and after. You showed me a book that I read. Actually, I think it's on my night table right now because I was referencing some pages, but Jesus the Rebel.
What a legend.
And just
love that book. Love it.
That guy would hate half of his fault. No, I'm kidding. He wouldn't hate because he doesn't
well,
hate. He doesn't.
I was like ready to jump on board. I'm like,
Right? Like, well, no, okay, maybe his human side would, but he also had a divine side. Okay, guys, like, come on.
We're theologians.
If I were a one of the disciples, I would have been one of the people that were like, "Excuse me, don't talk to Jesus," and like, he would have been like, "No, it's okay." Like, I would have been like, "Please don't talk to
Jesus."
I would have, because they did. The disciples totally did. They were like, "Jesus, we'll handle it." Like, well, let's,
Yeah.
This man,
step away.
He's a sinner. Like, this man be sinning. We've got this. Anyways.
The reason I bring that book up is just honestly, you only really need to know the title, right? Jesus was a rebel in his time. And I feel like oftentimes people, social justice advocates or people who work for social justice, really working for change, working for systemic change. And that's what Jesus did. And that's kind of where my interest in social justice was founded. And I often say that my faith is rooted in the life of Christ and the Gospels, because I find my motivation and inspiration from those stories. I especially appreciate his interactions with the Pharisees, because the Pharisees are always like, this is how it always is.
That's what I'm saying.
Like, he's like, no.
That was a good Pharisee
he's like,
impression.
No, yes, thank you. I've been studying for a while. And it's like, he's a tax collector. Why would you do that? And it's like, what? He's a tax collector. Like,
I love how sinners are either tax collectors or prostitutes. It's like, there's no in between in the Bible. It's just like, you either collect taxes or you're really having sex. Like, that's like, that is what you are in the Bible. If you're that's how they describe sinners. Anyways,
so I don't know. That for me, I guess that's where religion for me, that's the role that it has, because it's as you were saying, there's that something bigger. It's something that's your set of morals that it gives you, the virtues that you're raised with. It's where I have issue with religion, or I'm just going to speak people who listen to the show know that I'm a Catholic. It's with like the institutional church. It's with certain policies that haven't changed or adapted with the worlds, or like I don't know. I'm not going to give examples because I think so many different things can come up for people when I say this, but I think that's where it's difficult, because a lot of what Catholicism teaches does not reflect the world that I see every day.
Yeah.
So
100%. I think a professor in grad school told me this, and I never will forget it, that he said, and you probably heard me say this before, but he said that the moment Christianity became the religion of the empire, it all went downhill. The moment Constantine was like, this is the official religion of the empire and everybody has to convert, we lost sight of what it was about, right? Because I love that book, and a mentor gave me that book, and I was like, yes, because
Jesus the Rebel.
Yeah. It was Nick, my mentor.
It was Nick.
Because like Jesus was like a badass, like radical. Table flipping Jesus is my favorite Jesus. I love that shit. I love that he just walked in there and he was like, ah, and like flipped the table and was like yelling at people, because I'm like, yes, like that is, I connect to that. It taps into like the anger.
He's the original Avril Lavigne crashing the mall in 2002. Like, there he is.
He really, yes.
He
and
is.
like, he was like, I do not care what you say. Like, this is who my priority is. These are the people that I'm spending time with. And there's like it was such a radical stance. And so much so that he was executed, right, by the state. But yeah, I think like once Christianity specifically, I don't even want to say, I mean, white Christianity for sure, but like Christianity in Constantine's time, once it became aligned with power, it just disintegrated. And I think that's what's happened with the U.S. Catholic Church, right? There's so much interwoven with power that we've lost sight of what's at the core. And
can I just say too that like the whole you have to do this in order to be Catholic, or you have to do, no, you don't. Okay, like, or
even like any religion, like some of the things is just
but like, even though like, well, you have to go to church, no, you don't. A lot of people don't feel, well, a lot of people consider themselves religious or Catholic or Christian and don't go to church, and a lot of people feel that we've spoken to feel unwelcome there. I personally do not believe in the Jesus that the Bible talks about for the most part, because we know that these people were humans trying to describe what was going on around them. And it's only written from one perspective. Like, it was male writers, for what we know. I mean, I wasn't there. I went to church when I was working at Loyola. Like, I went there when I was like doing hospitality, because I like having a role more than I like just sitting in a pew.
Thank you for your liturgical service.
You're really welcome.
Shout out.
Representing all the sacristans, past and present.
And honestly, when I was doing it, I looked phenomenal. No, I'm kidding.
Yes, and that's what it's about, really.
Exactly, right?
It's a fashion show.
No. And I honestly, I was not. I just needed. I felt like the moment needed a joke, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, you don't have, like, I don't know. I like what George says about, and I'll keep his last name out of here, but Catholic.
Even though we've said it on the show before, but we can keep it out of this episode.
We've gone back and edited, but Catholic with a small c, you know? I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like, as I've gotten older and I've kind of just been on my own journey of, like, my understanding of my faith, I moved a lot towards, and I talk about this with people in the office. I've been really drawn like to the Quakers, in the fact that that like there is communal worship. I don't love that phrase worship, but like there's communal wisdom. Like every person within a meeting has wisdom to share, and that you don't require like an intermediary with God, and that has really resonated with me. But it's taken a long time to like get to the point where I'm like unpacking my religious trauma and being like, oh my God, like, do I really believe all of these things? And some of the things I do, right? And some of the things I'm like, I don't know if I'm on board with that at this point. But it takes a lot of work, and it's like so personal. It's like so deeply personal. But I think some really beautiful things can come from that. And like at the Ignatian Family Teach-In for Justice.
Heard of it. I like how you came close to the mic. That was iconic.
Came back. Yeah.
I attended a session from given by a colleague, Teresa Carreño Peterson, and she talked about somatic discernment. And she was talking about like paying attention to our bodies and recognizing like the wisdom within our own bodies. And that is like very much something I am like getting into these days of, and it's super Ignatian too, right? That's what she did. She drew those ties between that and discernment. How are we paying attention to these inner workings of our minds and our hearts and our bodies? And I'm like, this I am like about. I'm less about like, are you allowed to receive communion or not? Or like, are you standing or kneeling? Like, I'm more about like, how are we tapping into the wisdom of our bodies to connect with God? You know, like that's more my vibe.
And Ignatius was very much like, I mean, look, take Ignatian contemplation as a form of prayer, like putting yourself into the story, but like actually like, I don't know. Ignatian contemplation is cool because you're supposed to read the story, like a story or a few verses, like repeatedly, and it's close your eyes, put yourself in the story. Are you Jesus? Are you a disciple? Are you the woman at the well? Are you like who are you in the story? Are you just someone who's observing from a mountaintop as you're watching things happen down in a valley? Like where do you see yourself in the story, and where personally do you feel you resonate most with it? I don't know. It's a very Ignatian thing, and I think that's why I loved my introduction to the Jesuits and Ignatian spirituality was at Loyola, and I think it was yours too, Emily. Nick, you went to a Jesuit high school.
Yes.
But I feel like Ignatian spirituality is so accessible and approachable because it's a spirituality. So it's yes, it is in the context of the Catholic Church, but no matter where you are in your religious journey, I feel like you can resonate with aspects of it, which makes it so cool. Yeah. Side note, I guess that was.
But those are all really useful tools.
And Ignatius himself is such a symbol of hope for a better future and a better self too, because he, like, the Bible would call him a tax collector / prostitute, and haters would say it's fake. Like, I just, like he
had the prostitute side,
did.
Kind of womanizer. What's the sign that kept getting stolen? Party Boy. That was like
he was a womanizer.mp3 by Britney Spears, and he had this like full turnaround. Granted, it took a cannonball, but he did, and he became a saint. So look at that.
I love that Saint Ignatius is the only saint with a notarized police record, and I love that he went to the extreme and was like, I'm gonna live in a cave and not bathe for months, and like everybody was like, ooh, and he was like, whoa,
that sounds like
too
a
much.
Sin.
He's like, let's recalibrate. Like his is a journey of like understanding, a journey of like information gathering and adapting based on your information, based on new info. Like,
yes,
it's just like that is okay, and that's encouraged. And I wish that there are so many spaces within the Jesuit justice world where people are so beautifully interweaving these things, right? And saying, how do we look critically at ourselves as a Catholic Church, as an institution, and use the tools that we have to improve, constant challenge to improve, right? But there are so many people that just can't access that, and it sucks. It really sucks. Every time the USCCB puts out a statement, I'm like, no, please God, no. Like, It's hard,
Oh my
but
gosh.
yeah, I like that, Nick. I think it is a good example of hope for a different future.
As we kind of bring this episode to a close, we've talked a lot about. I want to end it with a quote from someone that we all know. We've talked a lot about hope. We've talked about kind of the relation between faith and hope, and someone that we all know, a colleague of ours, Reverend Scott Adams, said that hope is a confident expectation, and I feel like that framing of hope is it. I've said the word fascinating so many times in this
Fascinating.
episode, but it's fascinating. I feel like David Attenborough.
Sir
It's
David
fascinating.
Attenborough.
So, but I feel like that's such a unique framing, and an uplifting perspective from a man who has a reserve of hope that will not dry up. If you know Rev Scott, you know that he is someone who, in the darkest of times, will still have some light and enough to share. And so, with that framing of hope is a confident expectation, we've talked about kind of like structural hope and personal hope. I want to ask both of you, and I'll answer myself. Where do you find your personal hope nowadays? And cut.
I have an answer. I think I
Oh
have
my
an
god,
answer,
I don't have an answer.
no, but it might be like pulling it out of my ass. Like, I was just gonna say what a belief and what I can't access. Like, I was gonna originally say like holding on to what I don't have, but I don't mean it. That sounds like a materialistic thing. Like, I'm gonna get that car. Just kidding. I hate cars. I hate cars. I will stick with my Subaru for as long as I live. I love donuts.
I'm still driving the car I learned how to drive in, Nick, so
I love
it's okay.
that.
Her name is Lil Blue.
I love that. I love that.
Low blue or little blue?
Lil.
L-I-L.
L apostrophe.
I see. I like
Yeah.
a rapper.
Yeah. No, but so that's one, just like when you don't have what you need. And by what you like, I'm speaking more from like an idea, not like physical things. I'm not talking about material things. I'm not even talking about like food and like shelter, because I've just, admittedly, I'm privileged enough to have those things, but I mean like something. If I need healing, and I don't have it in the moment, and just believing that it can happen, it's holding on to the idea of what you need. Because without it, you don't have it anyways, and it's like you're either gonna have it in your mind or you're not gonna have it at all.
I like that.
And if that was bad, I'll put it right back where it came from. That's enough out of me. I'm really curious to hear Emily's answer. Not to put pressure on you, but like you're like.
Should we save her for the finale? I don't know. Like for the end, the finale.
Well, if you have an answer, then sure.
I have one. I don't know. If, this sounds cliche, but I find hope in people and in community and in my friends and my family. I mean, in all of those, my friends and my family and my community, like I don't agree with everyone, and I don't, that's not what this world is about. In fact, I even though it can be frustrating sometimes when you don't agree with everyone, I love that I don't agree with everyone, because I think the world would be painfully boring if I agreed with everything that everybody said, whether it be politically, religiously, whatever. And from whatever lens you take our conversation from the politics side, from the social justice side, from the religious side, from if you hate the MCU, I don't know, like
Get off this podcast.
get off the show.
Yeah.
No, but I find hope in community, because in the end, I think that as humans, I mean, I also am like in the field of like psychology and stuff, and I love, just making connections
In the
to people and
feelings
building that
business.
stuff.
That's
But
what my dad says.
the feelings business. Yes, I'm in the
Yeah.
feelings business, and I think that we have a lot more in common than we do different. And I think when people come together, that shows a lot of hope. Like in the darkest of times and in the best of times, I think that brings me a lot of hope. And now I'm sounding like Charles Dickens in the beginning of Tale of Two Cities. And
It was the
darkest
best of
times, the
times.
worst. Best of times, it was the
I was
worst
gonna
of
say-
times.
I was gonna say
God
that.
bless us, everyone.
Yeah.
It was
And
a
then Christmas Carol.
accurate answer though. It very very like accurately sums up like who Justin Dew is. Honestly, like
Aw.
I have to say.
Hmm.
Thank you. Pass it. You ever play
Yes.
Bop It?
Yeah. Pull it,
That's it.
if you will.
All right, here's what I'll say. I think that, well, in reference to Reverend Scott Hamilton Adams, who I
I've
love,
heard of him.
he has said that, and I told this to you all. He said that, and I was like, what the hell does that mean? And I am continued to be challenged by it, because I'm not sure I've ever accessed the confident expectation side of that, right? But it is a goal. I'm moving towards it, right? It's something for me personally to strive for, to have such hope that it is a confident expectation, because I believe it wholeheartedly when, like, from him, right? Like you said, he's like a bottomless well of hope, and it's something we didn't quite touch on, right? But like, not optimism, not like good vibes only, but like hope, like deep rooted hope. So that's a challenge. But what's coming to mind, I think, is that when I look at the world, like the enormity of the world and all that it has to offer, like I just feel so sure that like there is something beyond this for us, and like
Ooh.
that whatever that is wants the best for us. And like this is a very broken, beautiful, but like partial iteration of whatever that is that's to come. And like, so
Ooh.
I don't know what that is, and I don't feel confident to say like what I think that is, but the hope that there is something greater based on like the beauty and the diversity and the like grandeur of the world. I'm like, okay, like there is something else, and like that gives me this like more sustained hope. So when I wake up like this morning and I'm in like a really crappy mood for like no reason at all, it's like to draw you out of that, like to think that that's where I started this day, being like, all right, I want to get out of bed, and like now kind of sitting here feeling like that awe of like the world and feeling that hope, like hello, like that is what gives me hope.
Yeah,
To quote
I
Patrick,
love that. And go ahead. Oh, no, go ahead.
to quote Patrick Star, forget my dumb idea. That's great.
To quote
That was so
Patrick
good.
Star,
That was so good.
I will never recover from that. To quote Patrick
No, that was
Star.
really good, and I agree with what you said. And Justin has something more important to say than what I just did, so I'm gonna let him take the floor.
No, it was not. I was just gonna say that as someone who woke up on the wrong side of the bed today as well, And I said in the very beginning that I felt like this was going to be the highlight of my day. That it most definitely was. I just so much enjoyed this conversation. That answer to what brings you hope, it was so... I think it was, and this is in the best way, it was like concrete yet abstract enough that I think anyone can kind of take something from it and that they can relate to. Like sometimes it's not, you can't put your finger on what it is that gives you hope, right? Sometimes it's just a feeling. Sometimes it's just an experience that happens and you can't put words to it. But that's why, you know, they say actions speak louder than words, emotions speak louder than words, all that. So I don't know. I think there's so much wisdom to what you said and what you shared in this episode. And I'm so glad that we made this happen. So thank you for being here.
My first podcast.
Yeah.
Hopefully not your last. You're really good at it.
Hopefully not my last. I listened to enough.
So, this is the tease that in season 3, Emily's our third host. Yes.
I have gotten him to use seasons.
Oh, shut up. This is... I hate you. I was severely against
my marketing
seasons.
brain.
I was like,
but
no, we're
I mean,
just,
I said we didn't have to use them. But
I know, and now people call it that.
He's a
anyway,
marketing
and
genius.
now I'm calling it.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that. I'd say more like connoisseur. No.
I love this. Thank you so much for tolerating my annoying whining about wanting to be on the pod.
I have to say this was one of my favorite episodes. It was very restorative.
Ooh. The only thing we're missing is a grounding practice. And then it would really be like my stamp on it.
I was going to say, we need your Guinness shirt if we're going to do that.
That was the worst. Oh my God.
Thank you again, Emily. We really appreciate you being here. You always have so much wisdom to share with us in our lives, so I'm just very grateful and for you to be on this episode to share your wisdom with our audience.
I already know
Nick,
so many people that are going to be so excited about when they hear that you're on it. Like, I just can't wait to start telling people. I mean, that's
record number of views.
Yeah, you know,
this is a ratings ploy.
You know, I'm gonna get off and text Elizabeth and Rachel and be like, "Guess who we just spoke to?" Live.
They're gonna be like,
live.
"She never texts us back."
Oh, that's all right. I don't either.
I never text anybody back. It's not personal.
Yeah. That's all right.
With that, my name is Justin Dew.
And I am Nick Gervasi.
And you can reach us at our email, pointofdewpodcast@gmail.com, or by sending us a voice message on our website, anchor.fm/pointofdew. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Point of Dew Podcast and Twitter at Point of Dew. If you enjoy our show, give us a rating or review wherever you get your podcast, or share us with a friend or family member, especially as Thanksgiving rolls around. We really appreciate it and are truly grateful for all of your support throughout this show's existence, I guess. As always, we hope you have a wonderful week, but also month. We're not going to see you until December, so hopefully this episode gives you the daily dose of dew that you need. And thank you for listening. Until next time.
Hey.
If the other side is a sad story, we'll make good out of it, because we count the times when we were together.